All right, my friends, welcome to the show that dives into all things people, power, and politics on this Tuesday night. This is The Pulse. I'm Ruparaj. We went pretty heavy on President Biden pardoning his son Hunter last night, and boy, did you have some reactions. We have some new stuff about that today as well. We'll get to that in a second, including some of your thoughts. We're also talking about the Israel-Hamas war. President-elect Trump has demanded the hostages be released. We're sitting down with an Arab American as well as a Jewish American man about how confident they are that that'll actually happen, as well as if they actually think the war will come to a swift end, as Trump has promised. Plus, a reality check about those things. You know what those are? Those are those electric vehicle chargers. The cars haven't taken off like the government had hoped, but some stuff floating about them online just isn't true. It is not accurate. And what do we do on this show? We fact check the red or the blue. Doesn't matter. We're here to protect the facts. We're going to correct that story coming up in a moment. A lot of false information on social media about the Chargers. But we begin tonight with more controversial comments from this guy, a Metro Detroit lawmaker. State Representative Josh Schriver, who represents the Oxford area, made posts on social media that many say are just homophobic. Here's a look at those posts. The first one said, quote, "Make gay marriage illegal again. This is not remotely controversial nor extreme." Then Schriver followed those posts by saying former President Obama actually was more conservative on gay marriage than many Republicans today, adding the U.S. only accepted gay marriage after it was thrusted into her by a perverted Supreme Court ruling, end quote. Now, he included a clip of the former president where he said he believed marriage was between a man and a woman. We should point out, when that ruling happened, Obama called it a victory for America. State Representative Jeremy Moss, an openly gay state senator from Southfield, reacting to the comments tonight.
It's an imbalance of priorities right now, whereas everyday Michiganders are focused on costs and everyday living. This representative has signaled that he is willing to continue to wage these culture wars that disrupt families here in the state of Michigan, neighborhoods, communities, and it's a shameful thing to signal that is his priority heading into this new legislature.
He's not shying away from it. Schriver actually doubled down on the statement today, saying he feels marriage is between a man and a woman, and claimed gay marriage, quote, offends God. This isn't the first controversy surrounding the state representative. You might remember back in February, he made a post that appeared to support the Great Replacement theory, which is a racist conspiracy theory. That got Schriver removed from his committee assignments. Well, now to the story dominating headlines. President Biden pardoning his own son on federal gun and tax convictions. It spares Hunter Biden from serving time behind bars and goes against repeated denials from the White House and Biden himself, saying he would do no such thing, saying the jury has spoken. The statement the president issued echoing President-elect Trump's claims of a weaponized Justice Department. Those two have that in common. They both believe that in some way. And by the way, that pardon covers any possible federal crime Hunter Biden might have committed, not in the last 2 years, 5 years, in the last 11 years. Take a listen.
Believes in the justice system, but he also believes that the war politics infected the process and led to a miscarriage of justice.
Interestingly, Brookings Institution wrote a piece when they suspected President Trump was going to give broad pardons, and they suggested that it's not valid.
I don't believe the pardon power should be as broad as it is, and we can clearly see how it can be used and abused, even with righteous cause. No other parent in America has the power to pardon their son or daughter for a crime.
As we said off the top, it's something that dominated our show last night, and we're going to continue to talk about it through the week. And in case you missed it, Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio kind of schooled us on these controversial pardons. He says they're far from a new thing. Plus, two former state lawmakers, Democrat Sherry Gay Degnago and Republican Tom Leonard, gave their thoughts.
It's a family member. I think that's the basis of a lot of the controversy, and it's not unheard of. We've seen it in the past. You mentioned President Trump pardons Jared Kushner's father. There's a familial tie there. Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother. Even Abraham Lincoln pardoned the half-sister of his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. So we can go back through history and find not just family pardons that have been controversial, but many controversial pardons throughout history.
Let's talk about the charges for a minute. I don't think that if it were anyone else, Hunter would have been facing such steep prosecution with basically saying he did not use drugs and $1.3 million. Do we know right now what Donald Trump owes on his taxes?
I think the American people probably could have accepted it if he'd have been honest about it and said, listen, in hindsight, in self-reflection, my emotions have gotten the best of me. This is my only surviving son. I've got to do this. But instead, he called the prosecution political. That is the height of hypocrisy, especially after what's happened over this last cycle.
You criticize Trump, you get a lot of heat. You criticize Biden, you get a lot of heat. Get a lot of email on this show. But I'll tell you what, we're holding both of these people to account, especially when it's appropriate, like this time. By the way, more on that conversation or any other episode of The Pulse. All you got to do is scan that QR code right at the bottom right of your screen. You'll be able to watch any episode you want. They're clearly labeled with the topic. We've really been glad that you've been along for the ride, and we are not going anywhere. A lot more to cover in the years to come. And the reactions aren't stopping there. You had a lot to say on social media about this as well. I've been checking it out. A man you know well, who you'll actually see in a few minutes, tweeted at me this: Biden is a liar. Democrats love saying that nobody is above the law. Joe Biden just proved them all wrong. The Bidens are above the law. I'm going to love seeing how these hypocritical Democrats spin this horrible abuse of power. We got some more email here. This one's from Kim. Let's see what Kim has to say here. Kim Dan Rombach, we thank you for your comment. You said, with the advent of a Trump presidency, my standards have dropped so low, this seems logical and acceptable. There will be convicted felon in the White House with any number of shady cronies in the cabinet. There will be a pardoned criminal as the ambassador to France. At this point, why not? And finally, who else we got here? Oh, this guy, who literally is called That Guy. So this guy named That Guy from Detroit says, I mean, can anyone truthfully say they're shocked at this news? I don't care what side you fall on. You are most likely always going to save your kid. Interesting reaction coming from all over the place. If you want to chime in, hit me up. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be talking about this all week long. You know, President Biden did not answer questions about his pardon of his son today, but he did speak at the National Slavery Museum in Angola, which is in South Africa. It's his first trip as president to that country, with just a month and a half until he has to leave. Biden laughed off questions that were shouted to him while meeting with the Angolan president. But at the museum, the site where that was where enslaved people were baptized before being brought to America, it was a solemn scene. You know, President Biden acknowledged the human trafficking that once linked these two countries.
We're gathered at a solemn location because to fully consider how far our two countries have come in our friendship, we have to remember how it began. We hear them in the wind and the waves. Young women, young men, born free in the highlands of Angola, only to be captured, bound, and forced on a death march along this very coast to this spot by slave traders in the year 1619. In the building next to us, they were baptized into a foreign faith against their will.
You know, the museum was built in 1977 and shows scenes where enslaved people were put on ships to be transported to America. All right, let's take you back to the first Trump term for a moment here. One of the things he quickly became known for was how he used social media, especially Twitter, from attacking political enemies to calls for Congress to pass laws, even announcing firings. The then president said a lot in just a few hundred characters. Fast forward to now. Trump was banned from Twitter, as you know, after January 6th, but after Elon Musk took over, he was reinstated. Oh, and by the way, Twitter is now X, as you know. The president-elect primarily uses his own platform, though, called Truth Social. And now, social media isn't divided by political stripes. Millions of MAGA Republicans on Truth Social, or now on Elon's X, to hear what they need to hear. And then millions of Dems, bitter about the Harris loss, flock to a not-so-new but now popular app that literally bleeds blue. It's called Blue Sky, coincidentally. So that got us wondering, will you get a Truth Social account now that Trump is returning to office, even if you're a Democrat, just to keep up with what he has to say? We hit the streets to get a pulse check. Here's what many of you told us.
No.
Is there any reason?
No, I just don't do social media.
I'm not sure. I've been thinking about it. I've really been thinking about it. That's a good question, though. That is a good question.
No.
Any specific reason?
Don't like him.
I'm not a Trump supporter at all.
I'm not a Trumper.
All right, no seems to be the general answer that we got when we're out. Not a scientific poll, but just a look at what some Metro Detroiters said. And back on my phone, Jacob weighed in on X, and he told me this. He said, no, probably not. I work at a phone store, and I've seen a lot of people with their Android phones gunked up with pop-up ads and other third-party spam ads from clicking on some of the links that are allowed to be posted over there. Maybe from an actual computer, but definitely not from my phone. Who else do we have here? Headley. He had a very similar, he had an interesting response. It was just 3 words, a hard no. And then Big House 1970 tweeted at us with not 1, not 2, but 3 explanation points saying, most definitely not. And on fox2detroit.com, we're putting it to a poll. If you want to weigh in, just take your phone, scan that QR code right at the bottom right of your screen to vote. So far, most of you who voted say, no, you're not. Well, still ahead tonight, the president-elect makes a demand about the hostages being held by Hamas. You know what we're doing? We're taking an Arab-American perspective, a Jewish-American perspective, and we're actually trying to really get down to the base of their truths, their opinions. Will the hostages come home? Will the war simply end because Trump is coming into office? This is The Pulse on Fox 2. Thank you both for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. And joining us now to talk about President-elect Trump's demand the hostages be freed by Hamas. Board member of the Zionist Organization of America, Michigan chapter, Aaron Tobin, a friend of this show, also a friend of the show, former congressional candidate, and Arab-American Dr. Ahmed Ghanim. We thank you both for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you.
Let's begin with what's making all the news, which is this social media post by President-elect Trump, essentially saying there's going to be hell to pay. He says everybody's talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East, but it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as president, there will be hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those who charge these perpetrated atrocities against humanity, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit really in the history of this country, is what he says here. So, Dr. Ghanim, we'll begin with you. This is a direct message, it seems, to those who are holding the hostages, which would be, in this case, Hamas officers and others. Do you think those people who are in power in Hamas are listening to that and are taking this threat seriously?
I don't think the tweet itself is directed 100% at Hamas. Definitely Hamas has part of it. But I think it's also directed at Benjamin Netanyahu, because according to the Times of Israel, a well-respected Israeli media, that Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected a lot of offers and has made a lot of steps to make a lot of deals dysfunctional. It's brokered by the United States and by Europe, and multiple times he rejected all these deals. But Benjamin Netanyahu is doing that for his own political career. He is wanted by the International Criminal Court as a war criminal. And I think there is a call from President-elect Trump directed at Benjamin Netanyahu to let him understand that maybe he has to change his stand before he comes to office.
Aaron Tobin, the Hamas official who was quoted in the BBC, his name is Bassam Naim, he basically said Netanyahu has sabotaged any form of a deal, and he said that Trump should be directing his message to Netanyahu instead of at Hamas. Your thoughts?
We clearly know that's not true. Netanyahu has not turned down any deals, and that's according to the Biden administration and the Secretary of State, Blinken. Blinken has gone to Israel repeatedly, and he has said clearly that it is not Netanyahu, that it was Hamas. At the last minute, they always threw in a monkey wrench in the deal and did not want it. Remember this, Hamas wants the total destruction of the Jews and Israel. That is their stated goal. You can't compromise with somebody to this. How are you going to compromise with somebody who wants you all dead? You're going to say, well, can you kill just 50% of us? That's not going to happen.
But what about when you look at what happened in Lebanon with the Lebanon ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, and you look at the ceasefire that is by the way, is fractured right now with more violence between the two groups. But nonetheless, people thought that was almost a miracle for Israel and for Israel and Hezbollah to reach that deal. Why is it then not possible, do you think, for Hamas to do the same with?
It's very possible. The reason they reached a deal with Hezbollah is Hezbollah has been decimated. Israel pounded them into the ground. All these Hezbollah terrorists have been killed. The Hamas terrorists have been killed. All the head people of Hamas, thankfully, are dead. So who are we left to bargain with? Both sides want peace. I think Donald Trump is going to come in. He is the commander of chief. There are American hostages there. Biden has neglected his duty as the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States. He should have done far more to get those Americans out, plus the rest of the citizens in Israel.
Do you think that President-elect Trump's word and his maybe his stature and his past presence as president of the United States has made him more of a formidable threat to other leaders in this world than Biden?
I think Biden was weak. Biden was not trying. He was not working really to get the peace process in action, and is not what I'm saying this or people sitting here in Ferndale or Oak Park.
Sure.
It's actually one of the most important leaders in Israel. Moshe Ya'alon just said that Benjamin Netanyahu and the government of Israel, this is the former defense minister of Israel. This is someone unbiased person that likes Israel, like the Israeli people, and said that Benjamin Netanyahu is committing war crimes in Gaza and asking Benjamin Netanyahu to strike a deal to bring the hostages. So it is not. It is actually documented in every unbiased media outlet that Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected. The one who's throwing the monkey wrench in the process was Benjamin Netanyahu, and you can just Google that for any unbiased media outlet, including the former defense minister of Israel.
I have to ask you this, though, Aaron. When you hear about Trump being a staunch supporter of Netanyahu making a visit to Mar-a-Lago, yet at the same time, so many people on both sides of this conflict voted for Trump, hoping for an end to this war. But the bottom line here is, he's a staunch supporter of Israel, Trump is, but he's also urging them to end this conflict. How do you do both?
Through strength. Like when Jimmy Carter had the Iranian hostages, Ronald Reagan was, Jimmy Carter was weak. Ronald Reagan came into office and he said, if I don't have those hostages back, even before he was elected, because of the strength that he showed, the Iranians were falling over themselves to return the hostages. This is going to happen with President Trump. President Trump will bomb the heck out of them or whoever else he thinks knows where the hostages are. The people in Gaza know where these hostages are. And I believe Blinken, our Secretary of State, who has gone to Israel and multiple times negotiated, I believe his word over some of these biased people that are saying, oh, it was Netanyahu's fault.
But I have to ask you, because it looks like these poor hostages are bargaining chips in this whole negotiation. You had 251 hostages originally. And, former President Trump even told Fox 2 just this past spring that he doesn't believe that many of them could be alive. And we just found out, of course, that Omer Neutro, one of the soldiers, who's an Israeli-American soldier, there was belief that he would be alive, is dead. Mm-hmm. How many of these hostages do you believe are still alive?
According to the latest intel, there's over 101. 61 they're thinking are hopefully alive. What kind of people hold dead bodies in cellars and not give back the families? Okay, you killed these people, or even if they died, how are you holding dead bodies? They know they have 40 to 100 dead bodies there. What kind of people do that?
And Dr. Ghanim, I know there's atrocities on both sides of this, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, of course, the 44,000 plus people in Gaza that have been destroyed. Their lives are gone, families have been destroyed, and so many other homes will never be inhabited again. When you look at Netanyahu's close ally and friendship with Trump, what is your hope moving forward in this Trump administration?
I'm hopeful for Trump administration and any administration to create a peace process that's just for everyone. Without justice, there will not be peace. And you're talking about hostages. How about the hostages and the Israeli prisoners? We have, according to a lot of organizations, you have from 500, 700 children. Every single day, every single year, they are persecuted inside the military courts in Israel. Kids as young as 12 years old. What kind of people that would persecute a 12 years old in a military court? What? And if you think that all this environment will create peace, this will never create peace.
Anybody who looks at the atrocities on both sides of this and says, what kind of a person would do this? We know it's not the person who lives right here in Metro Detroit.
Definitely.
This is a terrible, awful situation on the international front. Last question. This candidate, Trump, got elected into office as the anti-war candidate. And he holds up his report card from his first time in office, saying that was a time of great peace. Are you hopeful under this administration, with this condition of the world, that he can maintain that? Aaron?
So first of all, that sweet little 12-year-old boy came up and stabbed an Israeli soldier. That's why he's in jail.
500 of them?
That's not true.
Okay.
It's not true. Secondly,
let's not adjudicate that, but I want to know what you think about the anti-war candidate. Is Trump under
not only do I believe,
world?
and the Jewish people believe, that he will bring peace, the Arabs in Metro Detroit, even though they were told not to vote for Trump, voted for Trump because they knew he would bring peace. But I think both sides, I think both of us and people that are civilized and care about other people, they want to see this end. They don't want to see these
Dr. Ghanim, but no group is a monolith, and Arab Americans didn't all vote for one person. Yes. However, when you look at this candidate, do you believe that he's more capable than anybody else right now to bring peace to this world?
I think we have no other option but to support this. Arabs, Jewish, Christians, every sector of the American community, they want peace in the Middle East. We got tired of seeing kids killed every single day in Gaza, and we want that to stop as soon as possible.
There's been atrocities on both sides of this, and you ask the question, what kind of a person would do this? And that question, well, as you can know, is rhetorical in so many ways, looking at how awful it has been on that end of the world. We thank you both for joining us. Dr. Ghanim, Aaron Tobin, thank you for your time today. Still ahead tonight, correcting the record about EV chargers. A claim the government spent billions to build just 8 chargers. It's all ringing on social media. Guess what? It's fake. It's reality check time when the Pulse comes back after this. It's people, power, and politics. You're watching The Pulse on a Tuesday night. We're glad you're with us. You know, electric vehicles are obviously a controversial topic, one that the president-elect hammered on during his campaign, and there's no doubt they aren't going over quite like many Democrats had hoped. But there's a claim that's floating around about these controversial cars that just isn't accurate. So as we've done since the show launched back in July, we're doing a reality check on the issue. First, here's a look at the claim that's floating around on social media and is being pushed by several high-profile figures, including members of Congress. It basically says the Biden administration spent $7.5 billion to build just 8 electric vehicle charging stations. Now, simply put, that statement just isn't true, despite it being tweeted out or X'd out or whatever it is on your social media. In fact, here are the facts. Now, stay with me here. That $7.5 billion represents the total amount earmarked for building a network of charging stations across the U.S. And those dollars were passed in the 2021 infrastructure bill. 214 chargers that have been paid for with that money are up and running in 12 states. Now, on top of that, the Federal Highway Safety Administration says there are nearly 25,000 projects going on across the country. President Biden's goal is to have 500,000 stations up and running by the year 2030. Now, right now, there are more than 203,000 public charging ports in the U.S., and the agency says nearly 1,000 are being turned on every single week. That's more than double that was available back in 2021. Now, I say it every time we do a reality check here on Fox 2. We don't protect political parties or lawmakers here on The Pulse. Just the facts, even when it makes people upset. We actually have held very evenly both sides accountable and to the same standard, which is the truth. And like The Pulse, just because the election is over, our reality check segment isn't going anywhere. And if you see something on TV or online that you're just not sure about, hit us up. You can send me an email to fox2newsdesk@foxtv.com, or you can scan that QR code to auto-launch the email on your phone. You can also reach out to us on social media. That is our show on this Tuesday night. Extra is next. I'm Rup Raj. Have a good night, everybody.